This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
And we are coming on the air right now because the House of Representatives voting on repeal of Obamacare. There's the vote count right now. It takes 216 votes. You see that bottom left-hand corner, 216 yes votes in order to pass this bill. Would be a dramatic change in health care, how Americans get health insurance and health care coverage. 7 years in the making for Republicans. They need 216 votes in order to pass this bill. Remember, 6 weeks ago, they did not have the votes. They had to pull the bill from the floor. Right now, they are one vote short. There it is, the 216 votes they need to pass this bill. And it appears, with the clock running out there, that the Republican Party in the House of Representatives has passed the repeal of Obamacare. Let's tell you what this can mean. It would mean a historic and dramatic transformation in health insurance coverage, health care for most Americans. It would end the individual and employer mandates passed by President Obama back in 2010, and the subsidies as well, replace them with fewer tax credits. It also eliminates almost $900 billion in taxes passed by President Obama that would go largely to the wealthy, and takes almost $1 trillion, a little over $1 trillion, from health care benefits for the poor and the middle class. Most of that coming from the Medicaid expansion to 30 states that expands health savings accounts as well. I'm going to straight to our chief White House correspondent, John Carl. We keep our eye on that right there on the House of Representatives, where they have now 217 votes, enough to pass that bill. Only 20 no votes on the Republican side. A big win for Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and President Trump, John.
An incredibly close vote, but a big win for the president. And this is one, George, where it looked like he had lost. He was about to do this in March, didn't have the votes. They pulled the bill. They tried again to do it last week, pulled the bill before they got to a vote. This was the president bringing back a bill that many, including many in his own party, Republican leadership on Capitol Hill, had essentially thought was dead and gone. His first major legislative victory. But George, this is also something that he will have to defend in the years to come. Very interesting speech on the floor right before the vote came from Nancy Pelosi, who said Republicans will have the provisions of this bill tattooed to their forehead.
There we have it.
They will have to defend that.
There we have it right there. The gavel comes down. The bill has passed. 217 yes votes. Right there for the repeal of Obamacare. I want to go to Mary Bruce, who's right off that floor of the House right there. We heard the cheers go up there, Mary. We were just talking about President Trump, this victory for President Trump, a big victory as well for the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and they really rallied their troops together in these final hours and days.
Absolutely, George. This is a day 7 years in the making for House Republicans, a huge day for Speaker Ryan. We heard him on the floor just moments ago giving an impassioned speech, trying to rally all of his troops, saying that this is a day where they can deliver on their central promise to the American people. In fact, noting that many Republicans were sent here to Washington to fulfill this pledge. I have to tell you, you have been able to feel the electricity here all morning long. The Republican meeting this morning felt a bit like a pep rally. They were trying to pump themselves up, playing the theme song from Rocky. Now, this has been incredibly close, though. It came down to the wire, and we should note this is really just the first big step here. This now will go on to the Senate, where it faces a huge uphill battle.
And
George.
that was the point the Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi was making, Mary Bruce, that this is going to get changed a lot in the Senate. And the vote was taken. I want to stay with Mary for just a second. The vote was taken despite the fact that most of the members had not read what was in the bill, and it had not been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. We know before the changes were made from that bill 6 weeks ago that the Congressional Budget Office said that this bill would cost 24 million Americans health insurance over the next 10 years.
Yeah, in many ways, a lot of members here flying blind today, voting on a bill that hasn't yet been fully scored. That means that we don't know yet the full impact on Americans, how many could stand to lose coverage, or how much this will cost. Now, many Republicans that I've spoken with today say, well, they have that original score, even though some of those numbers were pretty shocking. 24 million more uninsured over the next decade, 337 billion saved from the deficit. But they say that they have made just a few amendments, a couple changes since then they feel that because they have that original score, this bill at least will be in the same ballpark, George.
And we now know buses are lining up in the Capitol. House Republicans will be heading onto the White House for what President Trump is calling a press conference in the Rose Garden. I'm here with our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega. The president also coming to New York later today, which is why you're here right now. A big personal effort by the president this week as well.
Exactly. We are told by the White House that he made between 15 and 20 calls to House members himself, some of them telling us that he was personally responsible for flipping these no votes into the yes camp. This is right now redemption for President Trump. He was on the line going into this. He wanted this passed before his first 100 days. They were pushing, despite what they said behind the scenes, they were pushing privately to get this vote on that floor sooner than it actually came up. And we know that now he's got this delayed trip to New York because he's back at the White House hoping to celebrate with some of these members. But look, you know, you heard Mary talk about what's to come next. Lindsey Graham today tweeting that this should be viewed with caution. This is not a done deal. The White House may be celebrating today, but they've got a long road ahead, George.
And Jonathan Carr, our chief White House correspondent as well. One of the big questions here is what kind of involvement the White House and the president are going to have as this goes to the Senate. In these final days, the president was calling people in, also causing some confusion with his public statements. And one of the questions all the senators are going to face, and eventually the House members again as well, is whether the bill they are passing can meet the rhetoric they are issuing as they talk about it.
And the big piece of the big promise the president made over and over again, not to touch the provision that guarantees coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. The president was incredibly involved, as you heard Cecilia talk about, in getting this over the line in the House. My sense is that as this goes to the Senate, you will see Senate Republicans take the lead in trying to address the concerns that various senators have. They have to get almost unanimous support for this in the Senate. There are only 52 Republicans. They need 50 to pass it. Susan Collins of Maine is already almost a guaranteed no vote because this bill would defund Planned Parenthood, something she opposes. So there's very little margin for error in the Senate.
And Mary Bruce, as it goes over to the Senate as well, there's going to be a lot more focus on what exactly is in this House bill. By the time it goes to the Senate, we will have the Congressional Budget Office score. We will have more indications on what this is going to mean for the pre-existing conditions. We should try to explain that a little bit for people as well. In order to get the votes from the conservatives in the House, the amendment basically waived the requirements. States could opt out of this pre-existing condition requirement, but then one of the moderate Republicans, the Republican from Michigan, Fred Upton, came in and got them to add some $8 billion that would go to these pools in the states to help pay for those who might lose their coverage or might have higher costs under this. The question is going to be, is that going to be enough in the Senate? Is that really a guarantee that those with pre-existing conditions will get coverage?
Absolutely. And so many medical experts say that that additional $8 billion over 5 years to help cover Americans with pre-existing conditions simply isn't enough. So many groups coming out against that amendment, saying that it's just a drop in the bucket. Now, of course, as you mentioned, we don't really know the full impact of that change just yet, but we will know it by the time senators get a look at this, and they are likely to pick that apart to see what real impact it will have. There are also a lot of concerns about whether prices will skyrocket for people with pre-existing conditions. And so the real impact of this remains unknown. Of course, senators also likely to scrutinize every aspect of this bill, everything from Medicaid to how Americans will pay for this coverage. This is really going to be ripped apart and looked at quite closely, George.
Big questions also, Cecilia Vega, about the political impact here coming into this. And you heard the Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi almost taunting the Republicans there. The polling showed that this repeal is not popular. People were concerned they could lose their coverage.
And you hear this every day from people out in the field. I was just in Atlanta last week and was talking with voters there, and people have real questions about how this impacts them. Does this impact people, women who are pregnant? Does this impact people who have cancer? And these are questions that we don't know the answers to yet. They do have heard the president over and over and over say that he wanted to protect pre-existing conditions, and then you saw them waffle on that over the course of the last few weeks, conflicting messages coming out of the White House. And let's not forget, this is a president who said that he didn't realize how tough health care would be to fight. So we are seeing him learn this in real time, just how tough politically this is and has been for him to fight.
Many more questions to answer, many more challenges ahead, many more questions for every American who cares about their health care as well. But a big first step for the House of Representatives and the Republicans today. They have just passed the repeal of Obamacare. They're heading now down to the White House to celebrate with President Trump. We'll be back. Have a good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.